Hey everybody, this is Perch, and at times I've mentioned this concept of breaking a character, and also like why you want a company and an editorial team and a management team that will prevent you from doing that. And breaking a character is somewhat subjective. You know, we've seen lots of examples of things in the past where maybe a character or a concept was broken, and people either didn't realize they were breaking it at the time, or they're taking a gamble that breaking the character would be a good thing. An example of a recent gamble is the one that we've been focusing on a little bit lately: the aging up of John Kent. While some people, have just, basically said this is all Bendis's doing, he was the writer. Keep in mind this was a company decision. Dan Didio signed off on that. Didio was comfortable with taking that step with the character. They were doing that for a reason. It wasn't screw the fans. It wasn't I hate children. It was they believed there was more money to be made from a older John Kent, and with everything that was going to go on in Legion Superheroes and just everything else, they believed that there was more money in an older John Kent than as a kid John Kent. And the jury is still out a little bit as to whether that's true or not. Right now, we just have to speculate. We showed the numbers for Super Sons. They weren't amazing. It wasn't like we went from 100,000 copies down to 30. It was selling 30, and it is. And then after Bendis aged him, it was that title went away. But the character's appearance in Legion of Superheroes was doing in the 20s, and the character's appearance in Superman was doing about 35 to 40. So it's like we really didn't move things one way or another. There's still a possibility that an older John Kent solo title, and we're going to see one in July, the new Superman book, is going to do great. That suddenly this title is going to take off, it's going to be a hit, and people can look at it and say, well, it's a good decision. That gamble paid off. But in general, breaking a character is part of the reason why you have editorial in the position that they're in. You have them there to basically not greenlight every idea that the writer has. And that's a good thing, because in general, if you think about this, take all the people and the politics and the networking and all those other things away, and you just look at the business as a template or as an archetype. Then what you have is you have people who are full-time staff positions, people who are, in theory, with the company for years or once upon a time decade. Tom Brevoort's been with Marvel forever, many decades. And their goal is to shepherd this brand that is Marvel and all the properties within it, and try and grow year after year and make money and live in comics. That is their goal. So they're not thinking, or they shouldn't be thinking. Sometimes they do, but generally speaking, they're not thinking issue by issue or even storyline by storyline. Or in Tom Brevoort's case, I doubt he thinks year by year. Tom Brevoort's thinking, 5-year, 10-year plans. That's how he should be at his position. That's what he should be doing, and that's in theory what he's doing. I think Brevoort's an interesting guy because I've disagreed heavily with things he said, and I've agreed heavily. But one thing that I think is true that I could say about Tom is that his position and what he does is misunderstood. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of people look to him as like a manager in the moment, and they forget about the long-term thinking that he has to do. And I think that's I think that it's odd. I think very few people, at least online, whether they're complimenting or criticizing Tom, are missing a little bit of kind of the most important part of his job, which is as a steward for these brands over the long haul. And I think when you put that in context, it helps to kind of explain a little bit about maybe where things are going, or why certain decisions get made, or where some bad decisions got made. I'm reminded of I'm sitting around, drinking. A lot of my stories start that way, but I'm down at San Diego Comic-Con. We're having tacos, and yes, there was some Corona, and we're doing what often happens. I'm sitting with a number of people from the distinguished competition, who are both on the editorial and the writer side, and I don't know if it's me or the conversations I go into, or if this just happens a lot. And I'd be curious if some writers or some people for the publishers would confirm or deny this. My feeling is this happens all the time. I don't think I have anything to do with it. But they will start this game, I think, called crazy ideas. And so they will come up, they will talk about crazy ideas for writing stories, for doing comics. And the crazy ideas are fueled by a bit of alcohol and just exhaustion from the con. And these crazy ideas are never really intended to go anywhere. They don't. Usually, there was a one major exception where I remember like a year and a half later, one of these crazy ideas happens in the comic, and I'm like, oh my god, they did this. That's not what you're supposed to do with these. These are meant to be kind of blow off ideas, and I think probably most of you, in whatever field you're in, have had these moments where you're out on a lunch break or whatever else, and you have this kind of fantasy conversation about something crazy, whatever field you're in, whatever it might take. It's like I have a friend who I've mentioned before, and a relative who's a doctor, and they have talked about, hey, it'd be funny as if one of these days when we're coming into one of our consults, we just splatter blood all over the doctor's uniform. We're like, oh man, you wouldn't believe the day I'm having. And it's like, you would never do that. You would never do that because it would panic people. Oh, but it's funny. It's funny to kind of joke about while you're having drinks. It's never anything that would happen in real life, and that's kind of the point. So anyway, we're having some drinks and some food, and this idea comes out around Superman, and the conversation, which I have led this part. I've said, why do so many people struggle to write Superman? And I always get lots of answers, but in this case, like, I've got a good idea for Superman, and my story is this: that basically one of his villains, not Lex Luthor, but like the Toy Master, somebody who's maybe a little bit of a lesser villain, maybe a little bit of a jokey villain, levels up and comes up with this really sneaky plot. And I think it was the Toy Man. But anyway, it's we're going to make Superman think that he killed somebody. So, there's a big kind of battle, and we're going to put like a, the whatever the DC equivalent of a life model decoy out there, or a dead corpse, and we're going to have it appear that Superman threw a building or a car at somebody else and didn't check, and there was a person in the car, and the car exploded, and Superman realizes he's accidentally murdered somebody. And then the consequences of that would play out over the 6 months to 12 months in the storyline, where Superman is so traumatized by basically murdering somebody. He's supposed to be about defending human life, and he's screwed up, and he can't get over it. He tries to get over it. He goes out and works double hard to save everyone. He's just trying to make up for his guilt, but he can't. It continues to kind of eat at him, and he starts to become like the Superman in Superman 3. Like, he's unshaven, and he's just kind of manic, and he's completely coming unglued. And then he has a fight with Metallo or somebody more significant, and he just the dam walls burst, and he just goes off, and he's tortured by his own guilt, and it's his rage moment. And eventually he figures it out, and we move on. And this idea is funny to think about. If you think about it in your head, you're like, oh, that's something new. Yeah, true. It's something we haven't completely dealt with. They actually, believe it or not, they have done the Superman thinks he's murdered somebody storyline before. I think John Byrne did it actually in one of his runs, and it's happened before. But to really go to this depth hasn't played out over a year. And it's kind of, it's funny that you can do some funny things with that. But as we're sitting around the table, we're like, but we would never do that. We could never do that because it would break the character. And why it would break the character is because you'd have this moment that future writers have to kind of ignore. There's nothing for them to hook into. It's you get like a depressed, angry, schizophrenic Superman flying around. It breaks too much about the character. And typically, editorial, this is where a Tom Brevoort or Dan Didio in theory or somebody like that would step in and go, yeah, this is creative. Okay, thank you. But we can't do this because it fundamentally damages who Superman is, and the follow up story and everything else would be wrecked in this case. And so they, the things move on, and we get to more coordinated, safer stories. That, in theory, is supposed to be the job of editorial in a lot of cases, to look over some of these pitches and say, hey, this is even if it's the most creative story in the world, the outcome of this story hurts the character. It actually damages the character. The editorial should be looking out for that stuff. Now, arguably, and I know some people, I'm sure you're thinking this already, this happens accidentally all the time, or maybe it happens not so accidentally, meaning the writer is doing something the editor isn't thinking through the long-term consequences, and we get these moments that actually break the character, that actually do damage to the long-term success that then future writers have to work around. And this has happened all the time anyway. And I think that anytime you're using some, creative help, you're using freelancers, you're using people who, they are hired on demand. And so in theory, you would hope the writers would come in and want to do the best job possible and not break the character. And in many cases, I think the writers largely do have that mentality. I don't, despite what I think a lot of people suspect, writers, I don't believe, come into a company thinking, ha ha ha, I'm gonna F up Superman forever. He's trans now. Ha ha ha. Take that, men. That's really not kind of anyone's intent. But the writer at the same time doesn't have long-term perspective, commitments, or any tie to the company. So, and many cases are working in isolation. They don't know that there's a summer event coming with Superman. They don't know that the company intends to launch 4 more books the next year. They don't know any of this. The writer's just doing their thing. And in many cases, the lack of long-term visibility means the writer is going to pitch things, do things, write things in such a way that, may be damaging inadvertently. There's also the reality that the writer comes in and they're like, I like this particular personality. I like these politics. I like these whatever social issues. This is what I care about, and I'm going to write what I care about. I mean, the editor looked over my Twitter feed. They know what I care about because I'm posting about it 5 times a day. So, they know. So therefore, they must want me to do that. And to be fair, in many cases, the editors tell the writers this, we want you to do that. And then the writer comes in and they promptly do that, and the run is poorly received, and they don't get renewed for another arc, and then the writer's angry and doesn't understand. And that happens all the time. And so it is the challenge is you've got these long, and I've always felt like this was a conflict in comics. You've got long-range IP, meaning IP that is super valuable from a global brand perspective, and it's running a monthly serial, and it's intended to last, forever, for decades, if not centuries. It's meant to go on, forever. And at the same time, it's going to be staffed and written and contributed by people who have zero long-term commitment, who are often hired, again, in 6 months at a time, max. And I think that inherently is going to cause problems. I think that, it would be like if you had a company and you're trying to build to $1 billion worth of value, and everybody you hire on short-term 3-month contracts. Well, nobody who comes and works for your company under that kind of contract is going to be invested in the long-term future. Why are they? You're not, there's no incentive for them to become invested unless they just happen to be, good people who do the right thing because that's what they want to do. And that can happen. That certainly, there are people like that out there, and those are good people. And when you find them, you try and hold on to them forever. But that's not, you have to have a business model and a relationship that's going to align to the outcome you want. If you don't have that, then you're really relying on people's just inherent good nature and good luck to you. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you won't. But that's what I mean when I say breaking the character. I mean doing something in such a way that's going to inadvertently cause damage or intentionally cause damage. But what examples do you have? What do you think? What's a case where somebody broke a character on purpose or broke a character by accident? And let me know what you think in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and thanks for listening.